In this week's property breaking news, 83% of UK department store space is defunct. A new report confirms that the UK stamp duty holiday has had little to do with why property prices are rising. And finally, we'll share with you how anyone can become a commercial property landlord, and you can do it straight after you've watched this, so stay tuned. My name's Ranjan Bhattacharya. I'm joined today as usual by Andrew Roberts. We're here to review 3 news stories that have dominated the property news headlines and news stories that you want to know the inside track on and how they can affect your property investing game. Good morning, Andrew. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm fantastic. I've had a brilliant bank holidays reading, and boy, the press has given us some giggles this weekend.
Oh, it's been giggles and a little bit of a light news week, I think, but there's some important stories that we've teased out for you. Firstly, department stores, we don't need them anymore, do we?
No, well, I think they've been on the decline. They've been zombie business models. Don't get me on my pet topic of CVAs, corporate voluntary administrations, because that's not good. But as a business model, they've been in decline for over 5 years, and 83% of stores that were open 5 years ago are now closed. Now, that's not good for those people who were reliant on them for jobs, but it's good for the likes of Jeff Bezos, Amazon, and others.
I think there are two things there. I mean, there's one aspect. A lot of these companies went through, like Debenhams in particular, they went through these sale and leaseback schemes in the 1990s, where they decided to basically sell off for balance sheet stuff, to sell off their freehold properties and rent them back, but at on a leasing thing that really meant that the rents they were paying ratcheted up every 3-4 years. And as the internet came on and became more of a strong thing, renting the store space that they used to own just became unviable.
Yeah, well, I remember those days of, shall we say, management consultants going into large corporates and advising the restructures. I was in a large corporate myself and saw real estate sold off and leased back. Short-term decisions to help short-term profits through the P&L account. And that's what the 90s was all about, whamming in the profit into the profit and loss account.
Well, whamming was actually more 1980s. I think you got your decades wrong there, but no, I take your point. But from the commercial property news landscape, I think what we are going to see, and this is reported in the BBC and others, but this is just going to see this sort of bad news spin on commercial real estate. And one of the problems that we have with these large department stores is they ain't easy to repurpose. They were built for selling products off shelves. You don't have windows. You have vast floor plates with no windows, no natural light, very deep. So it's very difficult to see how you can convert them to an alternative use without knocking them down.
Well, that's an interesting point that you raised there, Ranjan. I mean, if we look at some of the data, and you know I love my stats and data, if we wound the clock back 5 years, there were 467 department stores on our streets. 388 of them have closed. Now, of that 388, 185 of them are still vacant, but 151 have been relet and repurposed. Now, last year I was in Edinburgh, and the former BHS store, that when I was a nipper, I went up to Edinburgh and I went in the BHS store. I've been in there now, and it's a Premier Inn hotel. It overlooks the castle. It's on Princes Street. They've got a bowling alley in the basement. There's offices above. So they have been repurposed, and the retail element of it is being carved up into smaller retail units. So it is possible to repurpose them, but it's not as easy. That particular building has great views over the castle, but a lot of these are sort of iconic buildings, and they're very deep. and in the middle of a terrace. So there's no natural light. So you have to look for occupiers who don't necessarily want natural light.
Well, cave dwellers, I guess, or goblins or whatever. We'll get back to the video in just a moment. What is the most exciting opportunity in property right now, and that is repurposing defunct commercial buildings to residential use. Now, most people don't really know where to start, what to look for, and how to exploit these opportunities, and that's why I've prepared 90 minutes of free training for you to get you started on this wonderful journey. You can register for this free training at property-workshop.com. Join me on that free training, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the video. So one of the things I'm thinking is that these big stores that are becoming defunct, they take a few years before people actually figure out what to do with them. For a lot of those, permitted development doesn't apply because of the light situation, and you have to go through full planning, which will take 3, 4, 5 years to do hotels or flats or whatever you want to do, knock down and that kind of stuff. But because these are iconic stores in the centre of towns, they remain a focus for people's attention and a focus for what's happening in commercial property, if you like, because people see these big stores empty for several years.
Yeah. Well, it takes a long time. There's strategic infrastructure within a town. As you say, they're anchor points. The towns were built around these anchor stores. If I use the example of here in Northampton, the Marks and Spencer store, which is a prominent store in the centre of the main high street, it took a couple of years, but the council have approved developing the site to convert to flats by adding additional floors on and converting the uppers to offices. So it's now going to become a multi-functional space. With retail on the ground still, but carved up to smaller units. So it tends to require a bit more insight and a bit more strategic involvement with partners such as the councils in order to get this sort of development through. That takes time and that takes money.
But meanwhile, while these schemes, may be sort of dominating the skyline, if you like, in the local high street, what is actually getting unseen is the quick-fire smaller properties, the small-scale shop and uppers, which fit the permitted development template, where smaller developers just going in, applying for their 56 days permission, repurposing it, and pretty much making the defunct property functional again in 6, 7, 8 months. And those go unnoticed.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I, we've done many of those, and you've got a lot of case studies on that sort of property. They're quick, they're easy money, you're in and you're out within months rather than waiting years.
So I think the message I think here is that we're going to see a lot of these stories of big stores, and you're going to see them on your high street. But I don't think that's where the action is for the smaller scale developer, because you'll be caught up in these for many, many years, and you need big funding for these. The smaller gems are the real gems.
Absolutely. I mean, these big department stores, they're the territory of what I'd call the build to rent organizations who are piling in. We've seen John Lewis, we've seen Lloyd's Bank, we're seeing the pension funds wanting to get into build to rent. And this is the domain of these sort of guys, I predict.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's look at our next story then. And this is the one where I'm going to try not to gloat, because I put out a whole bunch of videos last year where I was saying that the property prices are going to boom. And the stamp duty holiday is not the reason why it's happening. And now finally we've actually got the Resolution Foundation have come up with a report to say the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting when you look at the data again behind this one. I mean, July 2020, if you bought a 500k property, you could save £15,000 in stamp duty. Now, it's a bit of a revenue versus capital type expense here, but are you going to make a £500,000 purchase just to save some tax? No, you'll make a purchase that fits you and your needs. And I think that's what this report has actually thrown out. is how the changing housing market has actually caused people to change their lifestyles, change their taste in property, and that's what's driven the prices. Is the shortcome of that report. I mean, you were quite right. You were on the money last year in terms of prices rising and would continue to rise irrespective of stamp duty, and that's what this report is also predicting and endorsing what you've said.
I mean, I'm going to go further now and say that over the next year, I think prices will rise still further. And I think that's because of the money printing that's gone on. And the fact that a lot of that money that has been printed has been hoarded during lockdown. Sometimes because people can't spend it, can't go on holiday. And then and this actually happened in the 1920s after the when they had the Spanish influenza thingy and all of that. They did a bit of money printing then, and they found that people saved the money. And then when the epidemic went away, then people suddenly started spending it. And as the velocity of money, the movement of money accelerated as people came out of lockdown, then inflation was relatively okay, but then it went up. So I think what we're going to see is now that people are beginning to spend again, the velocity of money goes up, inflation goes up, and therefore house prices will also go up to match. And then there's all the underpinning issues of shortage and all of that. So we got another 1 or 2 years of this, in my view.
I totally agree with you. I mean, it goes back to a well-published statistic of £250 billion saved during the lockdown window, according to the Bank of England statistics. You don't get a more credible source than the Bank of England. Now, we can also draw this back, and I appreciate you were around in 1928 and you remember all of the Great Depression, but if we go to the more recent past that I remember of 2003, that was a period of time when again there was PPI claims, there was endowment claims, and what we saw was people saved that money and invested it into real estate. And that drove prices up. And you will see prices driving up from 2003 onwards at one of its fastest rates. So I will evidence it with something I remember from my youth, and you can obviously remember it from your youth.
Yeah, so I find it funny how sometimes, you can look at what's going on, take a little bit of stuff from the past, take a little bit of sort of common sense, I like to think, and just extrapolate what's going to happen in the future. And then when it's in the rear view mirror, some resolution foundation comes up with a report that says the blindingly obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'm not sure what the political motivation of that was, whether it was to slap Rishi Sunak on the wrists for spending £4.4 billion of taxpayers' money on stamp duty savings, or whether it was to try and encourage interest rates to rise. I'm not quite sure of the motivation there.
Well, I did a video shortly a few months ago where I mentioned that if you were buying a £500,000 property, you'd save about 15 grand in stamp duty. But property prices of that £500,000 property has gone up more than £40,000 in that same time period. So yeah. Obviously, stamp duty saving is not the reason why people are buying property.
Totally. I mean, it's like I said at the very start. If you're driven by a small cash flow saving on an asset, then you're making the purchase for the wrong decision. It's a bit like somebody saying, I'm not going to go out and earn money because I don't want to pay tax. It doesn't make sense. You go out and earn money to have a lifestyle, and you accept you have to pay some tax.
Exactly. Anyway, let's move on to our final story, which I mentioned in the introduction. A lot of people want to get into commercial property and they're looking for how to start and want to get involved in commercial buy-to-let. And now we're going to share with you a strategy where anyone can actually get into being a commercial property landlord. Because, if you want commercial real estate to let, then all you need is a toilet, it seems.
That's right. I mean, I thought I'd misread this advert when it said to let and saw the picture. I was like, they've spelled that wrong.
Just move to the
But
side so
actually,
we can see the headline a second. Landlord posts listing for office space located in a bathroom. Yes, now, yes.
I tell you what, I mean, it's a great strategy. I was trying to work out, is this somebody, A, having a joke, B, who, because of lockdown, is now working from home. His mate's working from home, and his mate's been given a budget from work to spend on serviced offices, and thought, hey, I'll advertise it. He can rent it, and I get paid for my mate working with me.
No, I'm fascinated by this because we run a serviced office centre here in St Albans, and the pricing of serviced offices is normally per workstation or per seat. Is this a 2-seat office or a 1-seat office? Because I don't know. I mean, how are you going to market it? It's 2 workstations or 1. You can have 2 people working in that office. It's got 2 seats.
Yeah, well, let's put it like this. All they need is a washing machine in there, and you could launder as well at the same time.
Well, I'm sure there'll be AML checks on that one too.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing about it. You won't be wetting yourself in there. You know, you could sit on the throne and do your Zooms, and nobody would ever know.
So, I mean, obviously, no one knows whether this is absolute spoof or not. But I mean, clearly, it's ridiculous.
Well, it's reported in the independent newspaper, so it must be genuine.
But one thing that is happening in the world of offices is that the office location can be far more flexible. And under the new permitted development rules, you can take things like shops and retail premises and convert them into offices as well. And since people are not wanting to travel into the big smoke every single day, and not everyone has lots of space in their own homes, smaller kind of communal office spaces are required in more and more towns anyway. Now, they won't be as extreme as this, obviously, but the other trend that's happening is that virtually any space, not this, but any space can become an office space as long as you've got access to the cloud.
Mm. Well, all I can say, Ranjan, is I hope you're not planning on using this as a communal space, because I think some privacy is needed in certain offices.
Well, I'm still fascinated by is this a 2 workstation office, and I'd love to know your comments down below.
Well, at £50 a month, I mean, that's more than spending a penny, isn't it?
Well, I think we can go on forever. Your best, please. I mean, Andrew and I could go on forever with office in toilet puns. So please put your best ones in the comments below, and let's see which one gets the most likes.
Absolutely. But I think it's creativity at its best. It's coming up with a new residential to office strategy, shall we call it. Unfortunately, there's no permitted development for the change of use going from residential to office. So I wonder if this person has had a full planning permission to get there.
Well, listen. I think this is just obviously ridiculous. But I think the main points that we can just take from this are that office spaces are becoming a bit more flexible, but this is probably the extreme end of the flexibility. I mean, the worrying thing I take from this is that with permitted development, for example, it was people that took it to the extremes by making flats smaller than prison cells that spoilt it for a lot of people. There's very little regulation in terms of standards and all, apart from building regulations and the like, that govern the letting of office space. And if this sort of thing starts to get out, then maybe it may bring more regulation and licensing into this space. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I would hope a prison cell is bigger than this office. And, you know, having seen some of your serviced offices, they look palatial in comparison now.
Well, I don't think any worker working here would be accused of doing shit work, really, I think. And that goes without saying. And, you know, you can have if you're sitting in that workstation at the back on a Zoom call, you know, you'll be making some funny facial expressions to your fellow meeting guests.
I don't know if health and safety are coming in there, because there's a microwave and a kettle. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not really sure that's appropriate for a room with a crapper in it. A Thomas Crapper.
Well, anyway, on that note, so there's a handy tip if you want to get into commercial property. If you've got a toilet, then basically you too can rent out a serviced office. Well, after that story, where can we possibly go from there, apart from to say, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you're notified when we upload new videos. Smash the like button and let us know what you think in the comments below. Andrew, thanks very much.
Thank you too. And if you've got a favourite news story you think we should feature, by all means, let us know.
Do let us know, yes. And see you guys next week.